Hi, everybody. Welcome to the City Biz audience. I'm thrilled to be interviewing a colleague and, most importantly, a good friend, the Reverend Dr. F. Willis Johnson, who I've known for quite a few years. He's got an impressive bio. I don't want to spend a half hour talking about his experiences in life, but he's a senior minister of the Christ Church in Columbus, Ohio, I believe now. And he does a lot of work in the bridging space within the reform political movement. He's authored a fascinating book called Holding Up Your Corner, which talks about race and community issues and a variety of subjects. So, Willis, I'm so pleased to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Okay, well, I don't know quite where to start. Perhaps we should start. I think it's been roughly 10 years, which was an experience in Ferguson, Missouri. Tell me if I'm wrong, but roughly 10 years. That perhaps changed your life in terms of the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown, a young black man in Missouri. I know that was an emotional time for you. Can you give me a little history of that story and how that you were involved? And that whole story would be interesting to our City Biz audience.
Yeah. Well, very unfortunate incident that not only happened in Ferguson, but became a rippling effect and a constant reality then and now, where a citizen officer engagement turned fatal. Michael Brown was an 18-year-old young man, and because of an interaction with police, ended up being shot and died. And that incident gave way to the realities or the situations that had been longstanding in that community around police and citizen relationships, but then also larger systematic things. And so because I lived both in Ferguson and pastored in Ferguson and was active or present in that community when the community decided to respond and engage our ministry site, as well as a lot of what we were doing then became even more profound and pronounced. And over that time, because lights, camera, and action, various things that we were doing, and I, along with others, many others, the work and the witness became noteworthy to some and useful to others. And that kind of changed a little bit of the trajectory of my work. But we're 10 years almost at the 10-year memorial mark in August of this year. And we still find ourselves dealing not only with that in Ferguson, but around the country. And I still find myself engaged with that work locally and nationally in a lot of different ways.
Well, I know our country's changed a lot in 10 years, and you use the term systemic, so it's difficult to change things which are systemic in nature. In those 10 years, do you see any positive moves that happened, particularly in Ferguson, where this all started for you?
Yes. There were, and still are, a number of things that have shown themselves positive. There's been some, and I think I could be fair in saying this, it's been some incremental and persistent or consistent kind of move forwards. But when you're so deficient and when you have situations that are so extreme in their nature, and when you have them, as you mentioned, when they are entrenched in system, in policy, entrenched in culture and behavior, when they have a value proposition that is not easily to discount. So whether it's Ferguson, whether it's the many places around this country, the issue of trying to change how police is a challenging one. To challenge how a municipality and how systems of government draw revenue, or how they find themselves solvent is a constant and long-standing problem that is not easily rectified by just mere legislation or changing of the guard. And then moreover, when you are trying, you cannot legislate love, you cannot adjudicate justice, and making people like each other or do right by each other at any level in any circle takes a little bit more than just simply, wishing it to happen. And so, yes, there are things that have happened positively and healthily in Ferguson. I am no longer a resident in Ferguson. I still have some touch point and very proud of the things that I think we were a part of, and to see leaders and people and work that has evolved and grown, and see leadership and their impact not only there but nationally. But it also we have the same problems yet still in other places, including Columbus, Ohio, where I reside now.
Well, you mentioned police policy, and unlike so many more people I know, you actually get involved and are involved in real change. And I might have the name wrong, but there's some initiative in Columbus, a dialoguing police initiative. Do I have that right? Maybe tell our city audience a little about that, because that's a perfect example of how, with hard work and caring and communication and open-mindedness, change can happen. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, the community police, dialogue police, is an effort in Columbus that is starting to take shape and have some influence and effect regionally, and is eventually, you'll hopefully hear in the next many months, some national impact. It actually is born out of some research and extensive work by a gentleman actually from the UK, Dr. Stott, who focused a lot of his research and work, did a lot of work around hooliganism or sport and policing of sport, particularly around the world respected sport of football. He worked with FIFA and others to help them find more positive ways, less corporal ways to engage fans, and the situation that sometimes happens when large numbers of people gather and are spirited, to say the least. Columbus, during the time on the heels of COVID, at one of its protests, had a bad practice and a very violent exchange between First Amendment actors, or some would call protesters, and the police. A subsequent civil judgment was levied against the city of Columbus and the police department. And in addition to that, the police department sought to be proactive as best as it could to avoid that happening again. And so over the last few years, they have been exploring better practices, adopted some of the work of Dr. Stott, and then most recently have really deployed it into full action. And so there is a trained cadre of men and women of diverse experiences, backgrounds within the department, who are very intentional and purposeful in engaging with First Amendment activities, what we would call gatherings, movements, actions in the engagement space, or others from outside may view as protest. They are participatory, not in any other way other than to be present and to be purposeful with those who gather. Their premise is to ensure or allow for the full expression of First Amendment activity and right, but at the same time provide what is often warranted and wanted, which is safety, some security, and a presence of that makes sure that whoever and however an event or a gathering is staged within whatever is lawful, but also safe and acceptable. And those are loaded terms. I'm sure as people listen, they're probably looking at me like, okay, so the police get invited, or they don't necessarily get invited, but they do find their way there. They have built over time relationships. And that's kind of the part I think, David, you're probably alluding to with my work. I've been intrigued not only by the research and the practice, but then they were struggling to figure out, okay, the people don't really want to deal with us. Could you help us? And we've been instrumental in trying to bridge or serve as intermediaries between what it means for the community to understand this usefulness, this function, this resource in its public entity of the police, and how the police can better find themselves useful and active in these things and not get compelled or get consumed by the issue as much as the responsibilities and the opportunities they have to build community or ensure that our community and democracy go forward.
Well, you said about your role and me knowing your role. I should, in full disclosure for our audience, mention that you served in a significant capacity and still do for the Bridge Alliance. And I know for experience that you really dive into problems. And I've learned of some great stories. And actually, maybe we could talk about, you have a podcast called Collage. Could you tell our audience a little about what that is and maybe tell a couple of stories? I mean, there's so many great ones that come to mind of some of the great leaders that you've interviewed over the years on Collage.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yes, it's true. We do more than just talk. We make stuff and have made things happen. One of the pieces of or niche of my presence and activity in this vast field is not to know everything, because I don't, but to learn as much as we can and encourage people to be celebrated where they are doing what they can to make a difference that can be impactful everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. And so over the years, we've been very intentional about identifying who are what we called catalytic leaders, who are people who are making impact, who are doing important and impactful work. We particularly focused on those many times unsung, maybe unheard, unknown heroes, and who are uniquely gifted and uniquely representative of what makes up the beautiful fabric and tapestry and reality of our nation and particularly our democracy. That's a cute little word to say. We were particularly looking at individuals in communities and spaces that aren't always lifted. And so Collage was an extension or is an expression of the work that and the efforts that we've tag teamed on, as well as the things that I have experienced elsewhere in the country. Because unless, CNN and every other major newspaper and vehicle just happens to camp out in your community for about 150 days, and all hell breaks loose, nobody knows who you are if you're not on TV or you don't do something wrong. So we took the opportunity to say, hey, who are people making a difference in their spaces and places? And so whether they were religious leaders like myself who were using their institutions and their relationships and their platforms to lift up things that are of public good and common concern, or young activists who needed to have greater formation, or organizations or institutional and system leaders like foundation execs and others who are making a difference and impacting. We brought them together and we tried to use a unique opportunity to talk to them and ask them the tough questions or have them share what they're doing. We have the work that we've done have brought individuals who literally on the front lines protesting. I mentioned about here in Columbus, working with the People's Justice Project, PJP. They're one of their fearless and courageous leaders has gone through some of the training and orientation and relationship exercises that we were a part of helping to shape and promote. That was the same individual who was part of that class action lawsuit that they won, who gave impetus to what is happening with people and policing here in Columbus to make a difference. There's other examples of a great church in Cleveland. Not that only things happen in Ohio, but Reverend Gregory Kendrick, who's gone on to do even a greater work in another part of the country, but for some years now has been utilizing and lifting up the concept of creating sacred space for communal use and leveraging what it means to be a repository or a resource in community. And how do you inform civic engagement? How do you inform or support community action with a faith-informed or faith-based response? And those are just two examples, even though they emanate from Ohio, that we can talk about, and many others across the country, as well as institutions that we've built relationships with. And so that's not only what Collage has done, but that's really been an outgrowth or an expression of what I think is my purposefulness in the field. It's always been to mine for what is and are things that are not only again impactful and fruitful, but could be duplicated, but also that are purposely executed and grown and nurtured in a particular place that can have greater use in many spaces.
Well, I don't know how you balance it all, because I know you do an incredible amount of community work. I know you're a minister, and because I know you so well, I believe you have a 3-year-old boy now. Is that correct? I know you have a few
Yeah,
children, but you have a
yeah,
young boy. I imagine
that's the youngest.
yeah, does he keep you busy?
Yeah, yeah. I pastor and parent across generations. Um, uh, so yeah, he does keep me busy, and it can be a lot sometimes. But David, we joked about this at various times. I'm very. It's a blessing and it's kind of a burden. I was fortunate to have a model of it growing up. My pastor was a councilman who became the first African American mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, and then who is now still a sitting congressman. And all the while of my youth and even my children, he was still a faithful spiritual leader, and he did that. I then went on to work when I got a call to ministry to work for someone that actually was an understudy to William Gray. I don't know if people remember that name, but Bill Gray, William Gray, out of Philadelphia, was a Baptist pastor full time. Wink, wink, and also was a congressman. He was the first African American to chair the Ways and Means Committee in Congress, and so I had this model both in in formation and then in mentorship of a pastor and communities or institutions of faith that not only talked about being for God or lifted up its values, but tried to live them out. And then every place that I had ever been, the church or that physical space, its assets and resources were always leveraged to do more and to be more, and they were open to people. And then the last example was in that mentorship. My pastor not only did that I worked for a number of years, but then he was an academician. I watched him go through his whole exercise to get a terminal degree, a PhD, actually from the Temple University, where he started under Bill Gray. And so teaching was another expression of how I could do ministry. So yes, it's a lot. I'm fortunate that I can blur or have it kind of meshed together. I think it's all part of what I identify as a call or a compelling or a responsibility. And I'm fortunate that people entrust me to do very high level things or impactful things, but also be able to do it to be manageable. And I'll be honest with you, at this point, I wouldn't know what to do if I only did one thing. It wouldn't be fun. I mean, I do all this stuff to stay excited, because while I love church, it's basically managing a nonprofit to a certain degree. That's fun, but I also like learning So having a sandbox to play in with other emergent leaders and thinkers is cool. And then I have to do something that makes a difference or be part of what makes a difference. And so that's what these things allow for.
Sure. Well, that's a inspiring story. I have so many questions. I don't know quite where to start, but maybe I'll start here because I get this a lot. I tell this a lot in my interviews that people tell me all the time, you're wasting your time, David. Nothing will ever change. This is the way it is. So I'm sure you get that question. I would imagine. How do you, I know you're a realist, and early on you were talking about the realities of some of the social injustice and racial problems in our country, yet you have an air of optimism about you. And you used the word just now, fun. So does that come naturally to you, or is it something you practiced, or have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the hope piece or the optimism is I believe strongly anchored in and supported in just my belief in terms of my faith and my want for things. I mean, I think in order to stay alive and to stay sane, you've got to believe and see something bigger than sometimes what you see and believe and what you're experiencing. But I also believe that there's a promise that has been made to be kept, whether that's in the inherent and intrinsic value proposition of this great experiment that some people don't want to call an experiment, called democracy, or in my faith tradition. I also, yes, I do think I'm a pragmatist. I try to be pragmatic, even though it's painful sometimes. And I also acknowledge that how we got here has taken it's been a long road. Matter of fact, there's been many movies. I think there's a book. Matter of fact, I just got back from South Africa, and I think there's a book that was written by Nelson Mandela titled "The Long Road to Freedom," or something in reference to him. So, kind of understanding that we didn't get here overnight, it doesn't make it any less palatable or acceptable. But I look for, again, the incremental or the mile marker. I'm a runner, and so you can't run whatever race you're running most times, very, very easily or simply. You don't win nor lose or finish a marathon in the first mile. It's from mile marker to mile marker, and you create places either to find rest and refueling, or you find things when you're tired to reach towards or to focus on, so that you push yourself or invite yourself to do, and to know that the closer you go, the further you go, the closer you are to what might be the goal or the finish. And so it don't always work, David. I mean, every day I ain't smiling. And you believe. I think I know this about you, as much as it may be costly in many ways or arduous in other ways. Belief is powerful, man. Belief is powerful. Whatever it is that you believe in, good or bad, is powerful. And I hope that people are putting positive things within their sight line or their vision cast, that they're reaching towards. And I think our democracy and things like that are something to strive to live into.
Powerful statement, and we're running out of time, but maybe I should ask you this. You said belief is powerful, but I didn't ask you about the ministry and the connection between the community work and the ministry. I guess belief is powerful in both worlds you live in. Do you preach that as a minister? And is it connected at all to this civic engagement community work you do?
It is. I think right now, it is very real. People want to believe. They want to have something to reach towards and to hold on to. For me, it starts with my faith, and respectfully, even as the rest of the world is falling apart, there's some stuff that I got to hold on to that the world didn't give and the world can't take away. But I'm also right now working to, in this time, both in faith life and faith communities, as well as in the larger kind of community, working on this idea and this practice of trust, because our trust is eroded. And there was a book some time ago, or in this, I can't remember who gets the quip, attributed for the quip, but the expression was, nothing moves faster than the speed of trust. And so, rebuilding, refortifying, or even seeding and establishing this idea to be able to trust each other, trust the systems or the ideals and the values that we have. I'm having to do that in my own faith tradition because of what's happening or has happened over the last many years, and in the particular strand of Christian Protestant faith that I serve in. And I'm having to do that in this community because every time, just like today, I don't want to timestamp this, but, in our community, once again, there's been an issue between a civilian and a police officer, and somebody's ended up dead, and it ain't the police officer. And so for every time I do work with these groups and we're making headway, there's something that happens that threatens the very tension or fabric of trust. So, they work together, and I like the challenge of I'm not proselytizing, I'm excited about the interfaith work, the multi-dimensional nature of faith that is now infusing and fueling and the work of the field, because that's one of the freedoms we have of expression that makes this experiment called democracy, even more powerful.
Well, that's a powerful way to end, Willis. This has been a moving interview for me, so thank you so much. Yes, headway is difficult, but those words of trust and faith and optimism and hard work, hopefully it'll lead us in the right direction as a nation, and will fulfill our dream of a healthy, pluralistic society. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm sure our audience will love it. Thank you.